Hello everyone, and in this video we'll be talking about solving quadratic equations using factorization or the middle term breaking method. Now firstly, what is a quadratic equation? Now a quadratic equation is an equation where the highest power of x is that of 2 or magnitude 2, which means x squared. The general form of a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c. Now what does solving a quadratic actually mean? For that, let's first look at a quadratic graph. This graph shows y equals x squared, where this curve is y plotted against x squared, where this is the x-axis of course, and this is the y-axis. Now an equation is never just y equals x squared. It's always in this form, and when it's in this form the curve always varies. It can be here, it can be here, it can be here, it can be upside down. And what solving a quadratic essentially means is we look for the x-intercepts. That is what solving a quadratic means. We equate a quadratic with 0, and what this means is that we're looking for the x-intercepts of the curve and hence our x values, which are usually 2, but they can be 1 in the case where our curve is a tangent to the x-axis, or there can also be no roots to a quadratic where there is absolutely no contact between the curve and the x-axis. Now the first way out of three methods to solving quadratics is using factorization, which we've covered in our previous video. So let's write down a quadratic. 2x squared plus 5x plus 2. Now the first step to solving using factorization is looking for common terms or common factors. And there is no common factor in these three terms, so we skip over that. Now we can go straight to middle term breaking. Now for middle term breaking we obviously need to multiply the a term and the c term. So the a and c term multiplied is 2 times 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. Then we look for factors of 4 which add or subtract to give us 5. So let's see, 4 equals 2 times 2. 2 and 2 can never add or subtract to give us 5. So then we turn to 4 also equals 4 times 1. Can 4 and 1 add or subtract to give us 5? Yes, they can. So this is the pair of factors we go with, and we can break our middle term into 2x squared plus positive 4x plus positive x plus 2 equals 0. And then we look for common terms and then we factorize it. So the common term between these two would be 2x. So we factor out 2x, and what's left inside the bracket is x plus 2. And since these two terms have nothing in common, we just factor out 1 and x plus 2 in the bracket. Now this is one single term and this is one single term, and what these two have in common is the bracket x plus 2. So we can factor out x plus 2, and what we're left with inside the bracket will be 2x plus 1 equals 0. And now that we have our quadratic as a multiple of two linear factors, we can separately equate them to 0 and isolate them for our answers. So x plus 2 equals 0 and 2x plus 1 equals 0. To solve this, we'll minus 2 on both sides, so x plus 2 minus 2 equals minus 2 to isolate our x, and this becomes x equals minus 2. For this we'll subtract 1 on both sides to isolate our 2x, so 2x minus 1 equals minus 1. 2x plus 1 minus 1. 2x plus 1 minus 1 equals minus 1. And we can get rid of the 1's. So this becomes 2x equals minus 1. And let's continue this over here. Now that we have 2x equals minus 1, we'll divide both sides by 2 to isolate our x. Divide by 2, divide by 2. This side gets cancelled out, so what we're left with is x equals minus 1 over 2 as our other answer. And these two values will be our answers. So let's do a couple more examples on this. So another question is 3 brackets x squared minus 2 equals minus 17x. So the first thing to do is obviously to get rid of the parentheses, and we do that by expanding it. 3 is being multiplied with this bracket, so let's just do that. 3x squared minus 6 equals minus 17x. Now what we need is our entire expression on one side and a 0 on the other side. So how we do that is we bring minus 17x to this side of the equation and its sign will flip. So we get 3x squared minus 6 plus 17x equals 0. Essentially what's happening over here is that we're adding 17x to both of the sides. So what I mean by that is what we're doing here to get 17x over here is we're adding 3x squared minus 6 plus 17x equals minus 17x plus 17x, which becomes 3x squared minus 6 plus 17x equals 0. And we get this. This is what bringing a term to the other side actually means. This is what's happening behind the scenes. So let's bring it to the general form of ax squared plus bx plus c, which is 3x squared plus 17x minus 6 equals 0. And this is now in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. And then what we do is obviously multiply the a and c term, which is 3 and minus 6. So 3 times minus 6 is minus 18. And then we look for factors of 18 that add or subtract to 17. So my 18 is 3 times 6. Will 3 or 6 ever give me 17 by adding or subtracting? It's highly unlikely, impossible actually. So 18 equals 2 times 9. Will 2 and 9 ever give me 17? Also won't. So 18 equals 18 times 1. Will 18 and 1 give me 17x? Yes, they will. And then what we need to do is break our middle term such that this add or subtracted gives me 17x and multiplied give me minus 18. And the only way to do that is if the signs on these are opposite. So 3x squared plus 17x minus 6 equals 0. 3x squared, since I need a 17x positive, my 18x will be positive, minus x minus 6 equals 0. I've successfully broken the middle term, and now it's just about common terms and factorization. So what's common between the first two terms, 3x and 3x squared and 18x, is 3x. So we factor out 3x, and what's left inside the brackets is x plus 6. And from these two I need to factor out minus 1. And inside the bracket I'll be left with x plus 6. Now I can further factorize x plus 6 out, and I'll be left with 3x minus 1. Now that I have my quadratic as a product of two linear factors, I can equate each of these to 0 separately. So x plus 6 equals 0 and 3x minus 1 equals 0. For the first one, just subtract 6 from both sides and we'll have isolated our x. So we're left with x equals minus 6. And for the second bit, we add 1 to both sides, and then we divide both sides by 3. So what we're left with, x equals 1 over 3. Now we don't always need to show this working on both sides. We can just simply do this way, where x plus 6 equals 0. Taking 6 to the other side means x equals minus 6. We can isolate it this way as well. And doing this would be 3x minus 1 equals 0. Take 1 to the other side, it'll become a positive 1. And since 3 is multiplied with x over here, if I take 3 to the other side, it'll divide, or it'll be divided. 3x essentially means 3 times x, right? So if I take 3 to the other side of an equal sign, it'll divide. Let's just do one more and then we'll move on to completing the square method. So the final equation we have is 15x squared plus 42x minus 9 equals 0. Now if I jump straight to middle term breaking here, a times c gives me 15 times 9 gives me 135, and factoring out 135 is a long process. So what we need to do first is look for common terms or a common factor in all three of these, and there is a common factor which is 3. So if we factor out 3, we're left with 5x squared plus 17, I believe 14, plus 14x minus 3 equals 0. And then since 3 is being multiplied here, we just take 3 over there to divide, and 0 divided by 3 is just 0. So 5x squared plus 14x minus 3 equals 0. And now we can middle term break this. So a times c, 5 times minus 3 is minus 15. And now we look for factors of 15 that would give me 14. So 15 equals 3 times 5. 3 and 5 added or subtracted will never give me 14. So what's left is 15 times 1. Will 15 and 1 add or subtracted give me 14? Positive 14? Yes, they will. So 5x squared plus 15x minus 3 equals 0. This is the only combination that will give me positive 14x. If I took plus x and minus 15x, I would get a negative 14x. And now we just factor out the common terms. So the common term in these two would be 5x. So 5x factored out, x plus 3 is what's left in the bracket, and minus 1 factored out, x plus 3 is left in the bracket. And then we factor out x plus 3, and we're left with 5x minus 1 equals 0. Now we've got two linear factors and we can equate them to 0. So x plus 3 equals 0, 5x minus 1 equals 0. 3 is, it's positive 3 over there. If I take it over there, it'll be a negative 3. So x equals negative 3, that's the first answer. And it's negative 1 over here. If I take it over there, it becomes positive on the other side of the equation. And 5 is multiplied with x over here. If I take 5 over there, it'll be divided, or it'll divide. These are my two answers.